you have a practice or are you running a business? Valuation is the ultimate KPI.
Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Welcome to another episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast, brought to you by Truelytics, the one and only comprehensive advisor transition management platform. This week on the show, I'm joined by Shauna Mace, a growth consultant and coach for financial professionals and RIA firms. And look, Shauna comes at this with a wealth of experience. When I actually first met Shauna, and I've known her for a little while now, she was doing this as the executive director of sales strategy and analytics for a large asset management firm that happened to be a client of Truelytics. And so Shauna and I had quite a bit of interaction. And she told me, she's like, listen, I'm leaving. I'm going to start my own firm. Congratulations. And we kind of stayed connected after that and had a couple of conversations. And I knew at some point in time, I was going to want to have Shauna on the show. She's just incredibly smart. She has a lot of good stuff to say. And I can tell she's doing great work for her clients, right? Because she's focusing on that connection between marketing and sales and making sure you get your process nailed so you can accomplish your goals. Because a lot of times, like translating like what's happening in your head and what you're saying on the piece of paper for your goals, it's not always as easy as you think to do. And I think everybody can appreciate that. We all have those goals where like, yeah, it seemed good at the time to say we're going to do this, but we can't really get it done. So anyway, a little bit of time went by. I was thinking about it, like, what are we going to do with getting Shauna on the show? And then she writes this blog post that just kind of hit me because it speaks to some of the stuff that I think about fairly frequently from a different angle. But the blog post is titled "The Downside of Thinking Big, Think Small to Grow." And I'm always reminded of this story of Lance Armstrong and the team Discovery. And before you give me a bunch of crap about Lance Armstrong's advantage was chemistry, right? Everybody was doping in the Tour de France. But take that out of it. One of the things that is undeniably true about the victories that Team Discovery had and the Postal Service team as well is they started looking at things a little bit differently. They started looking at making very small improvements on the bikes. They started looking at, stiffening the frame, changing the pedaling cadence, about changing the position of the rider in the seat and how he was, angling his hands and so forth, and started changing the shape of the helmets and some of the materials that we use on the bike. And every time they made these little tiny changes, they might have picked up a, couple of seconds here or a quarter of a second, even sometimes. It's really microscopic changes, but you make these little changes. They all add up over the course of a 2,000-mile race to minutes, right? And one could also say some small changes with better chemistry, right? Everybody was doping. They just had better chemistry than their competitors. Anyway, I love the story. There's a documentary on it at one point in time about Lance Armstrong and the team Discovery and some of the things they looked at for the first time, like legitimately putting riders in a wind tunnel. Anyways, enough of my rambling about that. When Shauna wrote this blog post, I saw it and it was a big aha for me. Had to get her on the show. So you're going to love it. She's incredibly fun to talk to, really smart, got some great awesome stuff to share with you. Before we jump into the podcast with Shauna, I want you to go ahead and check out one of the latest episodes of the Top Advisor Marketing podcast produced by Matt Halloran over there at Top Advisor Marketing, as you check them out at Top Advisor. Jeremy Carnell, Chief Operating Officer and President of Truelytics, was just on with Matt for an episode of the show. And a really, really engaging episode. And you really get a feel for everything that the team is working on at Truelytics and what they're doing and working towards to try to help you build a better and more efficient business and to help you grow and retain your advisor population if you're on the enterprise side. So really good stuff. Do check that out. Also, next week, be on the lookout for an episode of the RIA Compliance Collective podcast with Ivan Barreto, and one Terry Mullen is going to be joining that podcast with Ivan. So I can't wait to hear how that comes out. I've known Ivan for years. Actually, Ivan was on this podcast a little while ago, really early on in the podcast. So you go check that out. And then lastly, we're recording an episode with Terry Mullen and Scott Wetzel over on the Advisor Financing Forum podcast. So you see, like, this concept is growing. We're trying to get out there and get the word growing and help you get more content that is meaningful to you and your business. So expand your listening reach here. And then if you hear something that's really interesting, let us know. We'll make sure we get a mention on this pod because we want everybody to get more good stuff for their business. Okay, let's get to it with Shauna Mace, Shauna Mace, MACE.com. If you want to learn more about Shauna. Okay, let's do it. Here's Shauna. Well, Shauna, thank you so very much for joining me today. I have been looking forward to having you on the show for quite some time now. So welcome to the Modern Financial Advisor podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, you know what's really interesting? You and I connected back when you were working at your old employer, and then I found out you were leaving and starting your own thing, which is awesome. And we had, just a conversation between the two of us. You reached out like, "Hey, can we jump on a call and just kind of chat about business?" And we did. And I'm like, "Oh, we really hit it off. Great chemistry, super smart. Want to have you on the show." And I wasn't 100% sure. I'm like, what would I have Shauna on the show for? What will we talk about? And I just kind of set the database cranking. You know what I mean? How you do, like, that moment's going to come.
Right.
And then you wrote this fantastic blog post that I happened to see on LinkedIn. And the post is on your site, shaunamace.com. And it is titled "The Downside of Thinking Big, Think Small to Grow." So I'm like, let's dive in. That is a great podcast concept. So let's go with this. So I loved it so much. What inspired you to write that post?
Yeah. So it's funny. It's a lot of how I think about business world, but I think part of it's also with everything going on in the world today. We've all had digital marketing ramped up on us, as consumers, and there's so much to do. It's almost overwhelming. As a business owner, there's so much you can do. It's overwhelming. And I think, what I've always found in business is simplicity is really most effective, and especially when it's thoughtful, when it's targeted, when it's others focused. And so, you know what, I'm like, this is what I do in my own practice, this is what I do in my own business, and this is the advice that I give to people is, it's really about the small things. So it's how I live my life and how I run my business. And I just felt like it was like the right time with everything going on in the world. Like, simplify.
I like that, the coming at it. And that is some of the most universal business advice you often hear, especially in the startup world, right? Is solve your own problem and then help customers look for people who have similar problems. And it sounds like some of that was really coming through in the post. Now, you have a new firm, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. You must be putting a lot of this into practice. You mentioned you do
Mhm.
because you recently left a role at a very large asset management firm. And as somebody who, in my career, have left a really big firm to start my own thing, I know that sometimes that adjustment can be challenging and somewhat overwhelming. So, how are you doing so far?
Yeah, no, I'm doing really well. I mean, I really loved my past experiences and great relationships, but there was always something inside of, a little inner voice saying you need to do this. And for me, I spent my first half of my career at an RIA and then at the asset manager, and I was really ready to get back to that space, get a little closer to definitely closer to the advisor and closer to the end investor where I think there's real impact as far as the work that that we do in financial services. And how am I doing? So obviously the world's crazy, and I've really had to take my own advice. And initially I didn't, of course, like most people, and it was overwhelming. And I was like, oh my god, how am I going to do this? And then I'm like, no, you know what to do. That this is what we do. We have the goals, of course, but then how you got to break it down into something that's sustainable and scalable. And so I started to do that, and really I did actually build out very small goals. And things have been going really well ever since, and it just feels good to keep kind of knowing what I need to do each morning and just chipping away at it. And I feel good knowing I have a plan. I think and I feel like I'm in the right direction. So things definitely are going going well. But in the beginning, it was overwhelming for sure. A big change to go from a team of people and lots of resources to yourself and, much more limited resources and even just interacting in the world as it is today, having to figure out how to build those resources and infrastructure around myself again. But it's been a fun journey so far.
That that's so great to hear. It's I remember the shock value for me was like little things like, hey, the printer is out of toner.
Yeah,
Oh, there's not just a supply closet that has new toners in it. I actually have to order toner for my printer. Now, I don't print much stuff nowadays, but back in those early days after I left Fidelity, that was kind of the shock stuff. Like, oh, I've got to do like all the little things that I really took for granted that were there in the office and just ready to rock and roll for me. I'm gonna take the mantle and I love your advice though of like, hey, look, just focus on the small, little simple things that will help you make progress.
granted, if I could find an IT person, that's something I still would really like. I really miss having an IT person down the hall or being able to call someone. That I certainly miss that part of it.
I'll tell you what, I've had a few different tech problems over the years that have been, and I would say on the, intermediate close to expert level from when it comes to tech, right? I'm really confident with it. I've been tinkering with stuff since computers first came out, and I was early adopter for, all your stuff that we take for granted today, email and web and social and all that type of stuff. So I usually come at something like, "Well, I can solve this," but every once in a while I run into something. I'm like, "You've got to be kidding me! Like, how the heck do you fix this problem?" And
Right.
to your point, like having a tech person at the house would have been great.
Right. Some things you just need to delegate sometimes.
Yeah. So thinking about your clients, because of your experience, you worked at an RIA, you were just at as I mentioned, a large asset management firm for 7 years or so. You know this space incredibly well. How are you using some of this stuff to help your clients grow their business?
Yeah, so I love the RA space. I felt like when I was there for the first part of my career, I definitely drank the Kool-Aid. So, I mean, there's definitely a level of just like passion for solving problems, helping investors fulfill their dreams. And what I realized in my experience, marketing and sales is really my background, is that whether it's at an RA firm or an asset manager, I think that something that a lot of businesses struggle with is the connection between marketing and sales. And, there's a lot of great marketers out there. And I wouldn't call myself a marketer necessarily. Where my kind of expertise lies is really in the sales operations, implementation, bringing things to life, change management. And I think it really comes down to connecting the marketing efforts, making sure they're relevant, making sure that they are focused on, the right people in the right ways. And then what happens when you get a lead? Like then what? And and a lot of that I recognize is something is kind of is not focused on as much with RAs and advisory businesses. And I think a lot of it's just because small businesses, there's a lot that they have to do, there's a lot they're focusing on. And, of course, you want to get new leads, but there's this really important step of like what happens once you get the leads and how do you continue to sell and progress and convert clients even once they become clients to advocates, and how do you really start to generate referrals and there's no cookie cutter answer. Every business is different, but I saw this gap in the market. Not so much marketing. I think there's a lot of marketing and great marketers out there, but really around like the then what, the development, the sales operations, the back end, the systems, the processes, the mindset. I don't think many advisors are comfortable selling, and yet they work with people every day. So how do we develop some of those skills so it's less about selling and more about adding value and really being proud about the work that you're doing. So it's really helping advisors become confident in their sales process and also in their team's ability to sell.
I really like that concept, and because it is really true. I mean, first of all, you hit on something that often it's overlooked, I think, is RIA firms are really small businesses in almost
Right.
every case, right? There are a handful of very large RIA firms, but for the most part, we actually did this analysis not too long ago with the Truelytics team that the average number of advisors at an RIA firm, both state and federal SEC registered, it's like 2.8 advisors
Yeah.
at a firm on
Yep.
average, right? So and then it's something like just under 5 employees on average, right? And that's across the entire population of 15,000 plus firms. So when you think about that, most of those folks didn't come at the business thinking about all of these really, as you say, intricate thought processes. A lot of processes in there, right? They didn't. They're not thinking about studying the business and working on operational aspects of the business, as you mentioned, sales operations, of translating marketing into sales, and what do we do when a lead comes in? How do we process that lead? How do we nurture that lead? How do we have a system for nurturing referrals and so forth? And it's in part because when you're in a small business and as you're growing that small business, and it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, there's somewhat of a hold on to the ride. Right? Everything starts coming at you. You have to do everything. And then so some things just kind of fall by the wayside. And sometimes it takes a little while for you to recognize, you know what, we should have a process for something like this. We should start thinking a little more in detail about this thing to help us move forward.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's funny. I think these things they can be nuanced, and in some cases it's just like developing the right culture and habits, and a lot of a lot of times the systems exist. It's just how do we use the systems? How do we make sure everyone's consistent with questions that are asked or data that's gathered in or intentional about how we service, intentional about how we repackage the content we have, the marketing that we have, or the thought leadership we have. Yeah, I think it is definitely it's a good problem to have if you
Mhm.
are having problems with your pipeline. But I think it's also like if you're spending money on marketing, on any marketing or even time, time is money. You're spending resources on marketing, I hope and I what I see is that it doesn't happen. It's often not the case, but I hope that people also are thinking about the what happens once I get a lead. So how do I give myself and my team the best opportunity to convert that lead into a potential client? Or at least give them a great experience. So, so they maybe, even if they don't become a client, even if you're not the right fit, they still have a good impression. And, who knows, maybe they do end up sharing you with someone in their network. So how are you always selling, but not so that it doesn't feel like you're always selling? Or how do you always promoting the business, supporting the business from a development perspective without it being another hat that you have to wear? Like, how does it become part of who you are and your culture? I think that's the goal, again, to keep it simple.
Yeah, I like that. One of the things that you made me think of there was, you know, another thing that gets overlooked is how long the sales cycles can be
Right.
for RIAs. You meet somebody today, and that person might go, Shauna, you're the best financial advisor I've ever met. I love you. I would love to work with you. But that person may have all their assets tied up in their 401k plan or in a small business they own. They may basically have no investable assets for you to manage right now. And so as a result, even though they think you're amazing, so they're a great lead for you, they really have nothing to do. Right? You can't manage their money. Now, technically you could take a financial planning fee and give them advice and have them as a client, but most RIA firms are looking to manage assets, and that's how they make their money. So, what do you do? Do you just discard that person? Or, as you're saying, do you have a process for nurturing that lead over what it might be 5 years, right? It might be
Right.
5 years
Yeah.
before that person leaves their job or sells their business and has assets and money in motion for you to manage. And I've noticed that goes overlooked all the time is that there's what does that process look like? And the other thing you mentioned before is like many advisors and many RIA firms will tell you most of their business comes through referrals.
Right.
But if you were to ask, what's the process for generating referrals? There's a little bit of like, well, I'm not a we ask occasionally, right? There's not a truly formalized process there. So that's really interesting that you're focused on that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think that does come back to the like like even just small what feels like maybe a loss. As long as you can kind of like because it does, if you don't get the business you're really excited about or it doesn't work out, whatever, like how do you sustain even throughout those small, like we call them small losses? And I think that is where like the small goals start to help to keep you focused and motivated and engaged and like getting small wins as well. So it's not just like, oh, I missed this one. I don't know when my next up to bat's going to be.
Well, and that's a really good point, right? Like they're small losses. It's not the end of the world. Although if you're at the beginning of your business and you're really, really in need of sales to get things moving, getting clients in there, obviously every no feels like it weighs a
Yeah,
thousand
it
pounds.
might feel
But
like
over
a huge
time, once you
loss.
have a book, yeah. um, yeah, that's kind of a good bridge into one of the topics, one of the conversations you and I had in prep for this episode. You shared this really interesting story about simple questions that can help in simplifying the process of achieving a goal, right? Would you mind sharing that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So this is a story I read and I was really hit by. So the British rowing team hadn't won a gold medal since it's 1912, I think, early 1900s. And in preparation for it was the 2000 Sydney Olympic Games, they developed a strategy that was really largely based in performance psychology. And they really focused on, asking that they agreed to ask this question about pretty much everything, small and big stuff. Will it make the boat go faster? And it gave them a framework to very quickly decide, is this going to help or is this not? And if the answer was no, it's not going to make the boat go faster, then the answer was no. And if the answer was yes, then that's what they did. So I love that. And I love the simplicity of that. And I think that that's something that, for advisors, it's like, what are those very short term goals? And it becomes very clear when you are very discreet what is the right effort and what isn't. And I love that story. They ended up winning the gold, so it definitely worked. And they've really, I think, built the team, and they've, I think, continued to have a lot of success. But I love that simplicity in just like at the essence of, will it make the boat go faster? That was the goal. That's what they focused on.
I love that as well.
Yeah.
And you can absolutely hear yourself asking the questions for an RIA firm, right? What will help you close more clients faster or something of that nature? Does this help us win new business? Does this help us expand share of wallet with our existing clients? As you look through all the things that you're doing, and if some of the answers are no, then you could ask yourself, can I do without that process, right? Or
Right.
can I do more of that, and will it truly accelerate things? It's really interesting. It reminds me of the story that Steve Jobs told about why he decided to, start wearing the same black turtleneck every day, right? It was when he gets up, he doesn't have to waste time trying to decide what to wear. And time is our most finite and most valuable resources. And that's true in every business. And if you're spending time on things that aren't producing the results that you want, or that's a distraction, right? And he also said it also frees up his brain power.
Right.
If you have to get up every day, think about what to wear, how much time do you spend standing in your closet going, "All right, what kind of day does it feel like? What's the weather like today?" Whatever. But if you're putting on, for the most part, the same little uniform every day, and it doesn't have to be the same black turtleneck, obviously, maybe it's just the same type of clothing and you just grab one and go, uh, that's huge, right? And so in a
Right.
business, expand that into other things, like you're saying with a rowing team, if this is not gonna help the boat go faster, then, you know, we can ditch it, if you will, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's, yes, it's like, how do we simplify and bring clarity to quickly to what matters. So is this gonna delight our clients? Is this gonna be relevant for our target market? Is this gonna add value? And that's one of the ones that I use on a daily basis, is like what I put out there in the world, is it gonna add value? If the answer is no, then I'm not gonna do it. And and add value to the audience I'm trying to serve and support. But yeah, I think that if finding those kind of like, what are those key questions that really can really help support the larger goals is pretty powerful.
Yeah. So, what are like maybe 3 tips you have for advisors and RIA firms looking to grow through small changes, right? In your work with some of the businesses that are your clients, I'm sure there are a few common small changes that they can make that'll help get the ball rolling in the right direction.
Yeah, I think, the three things that I think are really important. One is to have a plan. And when I say plan, I mean, have clear clarity around your goals, like measurable goals. It doesn't need to be AUM goals. It can be. It doesn't have to be though. But be very clear with yourself and your team what matters. Like as clear as you can be, and I think the more discreet the better. If it is an AUM goal, then I think then I would ask, I would check in with myself and say, why? Whatever the goal is, why, and make sure that the second thing is buy-in. So make sure the why, make sure your values as an individual and as a business are aligning with the goals, because that's I think what when things do get harder, you need to have that buy-in. You need to have the values align so that you can keep going. And then the third thing is having feedback loops. So things aren't going to always work, and that's okay. But understanding how to recognize quickly when you need to course correct, or if things are going really well in a certain area, like amplify. So feedback loops, how you're doing with a certain group of prospects or clients, like that's so important. And that's something that I think is a big important part of any plan is like, okay, these are the goals. How are we going to understand how we're doing along the way? And that's those, I call them KPIs, key performance indicators. That's that's going to help you understand, and again, keep you motivated and engaged, and also help you understand maybe it's not going as well as I think. Let's dig in, maybe ask some more questions, uh, and or evaluate some more data and figure out how to refine and iterate so that you're not, banging your head against the wall. But plan, buy-in, and then feedback loops.
I love that process, and it's really interesting that you mentioned KPIs because Truelytics has their True Performance Report, and it provides 50 KPIs for individual advisors or RIA firms, depending upon how you're using the solution. And it also shows you how those KPIs roll up and affect your firm's valuation, right? So everything you do in business affects the valuation. It either makes your firm more valuable or makes it less valuable. And when you look at all these different KPIs, whether it's from the business side or your client side, right, or and other aspects of the business, you can then look and say, okay, where are the things that are hurting my business, and where are the things that are helping my business? Where am I strong? And you can either choose to lean into those strengths, or if there's a weakness that's really kind of dragging you down, you can drill into that. And I think that's a really, really helpful way to go about it. And it kind of reminds me of Tim Ferriss, author of the 4 Hour Work Week and other stuff, and he has a fairly popular podcast, I hear. He has
You
this
may have
thing.
heard of them.
You may have heard of him. Tim Ferriss, ever heard of him? Type, type of thing. He has this thing. He talks about the lead domino approach to making improvements, and it's what is the one thing I could do that would make everything else easier in my business, right? What's the one little thing I could improve that would make everything? So you mentioned if AUM is the goal, like the firm wants to increase AUM by $50 million over the next 2 years. Okay, what's the lead domino to making that process easier? Is it you're getting more leads? Is it getting those leads through the process faster? Is it higher quality leads, or is it whatever the process may be, or whatever the thing is? But examining that it would be really, really helpful and make your life a lot easier in terms of achieving that goal, instead of just sitting there going, "Oh my God, we need this giant mega plan for."
Right. Yeah. No, I think I love that. And yeah, I think that's totally spot on. It's like, okay, who's going to generate this AUM? How can I talk to those people more? Who's connected with those people? How do I get in front of them? What do they value? What are they afraid
Mm.
of? How do I, provide really content that is going to resonate with them? How do I connect with them? Like there's so many questions I think you can start to ask to unpack the how you're going to get to that AUM goal. And you can start to, even just getting them all out as much as you can come up with, you can start to prioritize like, well, which one comes first? And then what's the goal there? If it's maybe it's you're focusing on dentist as a niche. or widows. I think you had a podcast about widows that was great, about
My
niche marketing.
favorite one. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
focused on widows, which I think niche marketing is great because it allows you to then get really specific around the value you add as far as content and planning resources and investment ideas and all that good stuff that makes you relevant. But yeah, you start to unpack the bigger goal into these smaller tactics, and it becomes very clear. Okay, well, I really need to connect on LinkedIn I need to focus on, if it's dentists, then it's on people who put themselves out to the world as dentists. Maybe it's in my area. Maybe I partner with somebody who also serves dentists, who's a professional relationship, a CPA or accountant. Like there's all these things. It starts to become very doable and very clear. And the goals maybe start in one place, and then as you make progress, you have to continue to evaluate and change. But it flows, and I think that's the thing that why small goals are so powerful is it's just very clear what you need to do. It's that I love that the lead domino, things literally start to fall into place.
It's true. It's really funny, like on the personal side of this stuff, I think it's really easy to see it, you know, have results, because we're all living in this COVID-19, everybody at home all the time life at the moment. You're seeing lots of people try new things and do new things. And I'm into fitness. And so one of the things I started doing was the 20-minute body weight only CrossFit style workouts. And it is truly amazing what 20 minutes a day with no weights involved, just body weight exercise, how much of an improvement and a reshaping your body in terms of adding strength. I'm 48 years old and I can rip off pull-ups now, like legitimate pull-ups, which couldn't do those before, right? And at first they were really hard. I had to use there's a rubber band to assist, right? But doing it a few times a week, that workout and other workouts spliced in, but only 20 minutes a day. I'm not killing myself and just like working out for hours on end and, throwing down all sorts of protein bars and all that type of stuff. It's just basically throwing in some legit exercises, things like push-ups, things like air squats. Amazing how much of an improvement. And you can, extend that to other things that people are working on. But you see those improvements relatively quickly with little small changes. So I love the advice that you're
Absolutely.
giving in this area.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. I love this idea of growth is not linear, but effort can be. And I think that you hit on that perfectly. Like you put in the effort and that's what you can control. And yeah, the growth and what comes out of it, you maybe don't know, you don't always know what's going to come, but it's the thing you can control is the effort, which is truly, I think that's kind of the power you have.
Yeah, yeah. So let's get gears back to your business as we get ready to close out here. Who is the right type of client for you? So if and that's always a great question to ask of ourselves, but I like to make sure that anybody who gets on the podcast could tell the audience like if this you fit into this bucket, you should be calling Shauna, right?
Yeah.
Who's the right type of client for you?
Yeah, so I definitely focus on RAs. Typically, it's going to be, I would say, definitely people who are doing marketing or thinking about doing marketing to grow their business. So people who are looking to grow their business and hopefully have some goals. Maybe they don't. We can help refine those. But RAs, and then also, there are some financial professionals. I mean, my background is asset management. So people who serve RAs and serve advisors, that's definitely an area that I've also can help with just because I know and love the RA market so well. But people who are really truly looking to unlock potential, like it's those people who know there's more, who haven't figured out how to make that next leap, but are really ready for the transition, are ready to do not just the marketing, but to do some of the growth work, the mindset stuff, and the business work to make progress towards the goals, even if they don't know exactly what those goals are yet, but they know that inside there's something bigger there. So yeah, as a consultant and coach, it's really those people who are ready to unlock their potential.
That's great stuff. Wonderful. I'm sure we're going to have some people who want to reach out to you who kind of fit that mold and have questions or want to explore potentially working with you. What's the best way for someone to follow up with you?
The best way is to visit my website, which is my name. So www.shaunamace.com. And of course, I post lots of stuff on LinkedIn. So I love connecting with people there. I try to add value every day. That's one of my small goals, specifically for that audience. But ShaunaMace.com is the best place to reach me.
Great. Wonderful. By the way, I love you on LinkedIn. You do a fantastic job. There's always something good to see there. So reach out to Shauna on LinkedIn. Make sure you follow her or connect with her if it's appropriate, and like her stuff, share her stuff because it's really good.
Thank you so much.
Well, Shauna, I really enjoyed having you on the show. This was truly a pleasure for me because I like to learn a lot, and I also like to think about this process for myself and my business, and I hope that listeners got a lot out of this. So, thank you. I hope you're doing well.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And yes, I hope that your listeners got some value as well.
Perfect. All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. Such a delight to have you. And it was a wonderful delight to have Shauna on the show. I have a feeling at some point in time she'll be back on the show because she's really doing some really exciting and engaging things. She was so much fun to have, and she's incredibly smart, as you can tell. So awesome stuff there. As always, make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you like to get your podcast jam on, and leave us a comment and give us a share on the socials. We'd love to hear from you. So swing by TrueLytics on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, the YouTubes, right? Wherever you like to hang out online. Love to hear from you, and send in your questions and suggestions for a guest. You can reach out to us at podcast@truelytics.com, or again on the socials, or swing by truelytics.com and just use a little contact form there and you'll get right with somebody. Okay. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Make sure you wear your mask, wash your hands, keep your distance, and personal favor to me, be nice to each other. Okay. We'll see you next time on the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. See ya. Bye.